Today we are going to be painting this little warrior mouse. He's got a little sewing needle for a sword. He's got a little button for a shield. He's got like a little belt, some pouches, and a cape. I decided that his name is Jimothy. So we are going to start obviously in the largest areas. So we're going to start on the head, and we're going to do the base coat of his body color, which is going to be gray. So we can do the head, the body, the lower torso there, and then in the back he has a cape. The cape is going to be done in transparent blue, and then we have some accent colors we're going to be doing. We're going to do the belt buckle in a bright gold, and then I have a metallic silver for his little sewing needle sword. And then after we get that done, we'll do a little bit of base work as well. So starting off, I'm just gonna get the brush saturated in water, and then we're gonna make sure we got the correct amount. You're looking for that water to just stop beading off of there. And then we're gonna get some paint on the brush. Then we'll go in and we will start. So if you look right there, you can see that the paint is going on pretty thick right there. So when the paint's going on really thick like that, that's telling you that you're going to want a little bit more water in that, because the thicker the paint goes on there, the less detail on the miniature itself is going to shine through. So I'm going ahead and saturating the brush in a little bit more water and working that into the mixture. And then I'm going to go through and we are going to work that back in there with some more water. So we've got quite a bit of water on the brush, and since we already had a fair bit of paint on there, I'm just going to keep working that paint we had on there previously. I'm just going to keep working that out with the brush saturated in a fair bit of water, just to make sure that we don't have any excess amounts of paint that are covering up the small details. So we're just going to keep working that all through there, and we're going to kind of work through one section at a time. Right now we're just starting with the head. So we are going to continue to work on the head here. Right, now we'll work our way down, and we'll start on his lower torso. So if you can, I don't know if you guys can see that right there, but right up here there was a little bubble. So that is a sign that you've got too much water on the brush. So as you're painting, you'll kind of get a feel for the way the paint is flowing off to tell you whether you want to maybe have a little less water, a little more water. So painting something like this mouse in a gray, when you go through with your zenith highlights on the primer, it's going to really help, because even if you don't get a full exact coverage, that kind of white and gray primer is going to kind of carry you through and make sure that even the spots that maybe you miss are still going to kind of carry that color scheme without having to worry about every single little spot. And then there's going to be a lot of smaller spots that are going to be kind of a pain to get to, like the inside of the arm here. You're just going to want to make sure that you are doing some little careful movements, but at the end of the day, the blue on the shield is going to kind of overpower this gray we're using for his body. So if you get a little bit of overpaint, it's not the end of the world. And then as you go through, we were just working on the legs and the lower torso, but you can kind of see on the head here, as it starts to dry, you're going to see even more of those patches of spots that maybe you might have missed. So you can kind of go back through and re-hit those while you got some paint on the brush of that same color. So we're just going to go through and we're going to finish this last arm in the base body color. Now, as you're going through and you are painting your miniatures, keep in mind that there is a vast difference between something you're looking to maybe take to like a competition for miniature painting and something you want to just use on the tabletop playing D&D, Pathfinder, something like that with your friends. Because most of the time, even if you think that the paint job may be less than spectacular or maybe not meeting the expectations you've kind of set forth, odds are the paint job is going to be fine when it's sitting on the table and you and your friends are all having fun playing a game. Because at the end of the day, the whole point of this is to have fun. So if you're not having fun painting it, then there's not really a point in doing it. So we're going to go ahead and switch colors. We're going to go to that blue we're going to be using on his cape. So this is transparent blue from Vallejo. The coverage on this, it's called transparent blue for a reason. It's going to kind of, that zenith highlight's going to kind of show through pretty well on this one. So you're not looking for a ridiculous amount of saturation on this. You're just looking to get a nice even coat on the whole cape, because with that zenith highlight, it's going to kind of show through and provide it with kind of a sense of texture. So as you're going through and you hit a spot like around this area, you can see where it's kind of bleeding through a little bit more. So you're just going to kind of go back and get some more water on your brush, because obviously as you progress through the paint job, you're losing paint. So you got to go back and keep getting your brush in there to make sure that you're providing a roughly even coat. So once you go through and you get the bulk of the main part of the cape, you're going to want to go back and you're going to want to look from the other perspective. You're just gonna get a few little spots, and then you're gonna go back to this side. So right here around his neck, we're gonna go through, and since we already did the base coat on his body, we're just gonna be a little bit more careful, trying not to get any over paint onto his body. But if it happens, it's not the end of the world. Down below his shield there, you can see there's a little bit of the cape peeking out. So we're gonna work it around this little corner. Okay, and that is going to be full coverage on the cape now. So we will go ahead and clean the brush, and while we are cleaning the brush and while that paint job is still wet, we can go over a little something you can do if you maybe get a little bit of overage on the paint. So I just got a paper towel. I'm just going to twist it up in my fingers, get it so it's pretty small like that, and then you can see we've got a little bit of overage on his leg there. While the paint is still wet, we're just going to go through and we're going to dab that off of there. So you have to make sure you go through and do this while the paint is still wet, because you'll be able to get the most amount of it off. And as you can see, there's still going to be a little bit bleeding through on that. You're going to get the majority of it off of there. And you can see paint right there below his chin. We had a little bit too much water in there, so the paint is going to kind of tend to flow towards like the recessed points. So you can see that's why it's kind of got that darker tinge, but that's okay because that will kind of lend into the shadow created underneath his chin right there. So now we will go ahead and we will switch over to his shield. So we're going to go and take some of this fur brown here, and what we want to do is for all of the little strappy bits on him, like his belt and his cross strap, we're going to stick with a base of fur brown. So to create a little bit of contrast between his shield and the straps, what we're going to do is we're going to get a little bit of black, and we're going to put that here. And then as you're doing this, you want to make sure that you are working the colors away from the center, so you're not mixing up the entirety of your fur brown with the black. You're creating a separate area to make sure that you're not committing your entire splotch of color to that specific tone. So we're going to get that all mixed up. Once we've got that mixed up, you want to make sure that you're not directly going from mixing that paint to applying it on the miniature. You're going to be mixing that paint, and then you will go through and you will get some water on the brush, and you're essentially going to go through and you're going to want to clean the brush off in between the mixing and the applying the paint to the miniature, because otherwise you're going to have way too much saturation in that paint. You'll basically be applying straight paint with no mix of water, so it's going to be really splotchy, and it's going to kind of hide every single bit of detail. And then you can see from the light tone of that it's a pretty high mixture of water in there. So it's gonna flow really well into all these little bits and crevices on here, because with the Zenith highlight, we've got a base of gray or a little bit of white here towards the top. It is okay to not have a complete saturation on it, because that bleeding through is just going to provide a little bit more depth in that color. Work that all the way around the edge. And once you get that all set, you're going to want to work your way to the back side of it. And this is another spot where you're just going to want to be a little careful, because you're working near that fur tone that you've already set. And with the brown being a little bit darker of a color than that gray, it is possible that that can bleed through a little bit. So you want to just make sure that you are being careful of the transition between the shield and the arm. Just a little bit more towards the top there. Alright, and we're looking pretty good on that shield there. So now we are going to switch. We're going to wash the brush, and then we're going to go to the strictly fur brown color without any mixture in it, to help kind of create a difference in colors, so you're not kind of following the same color from here all the way through. And with this being a smaller detail work, we're gonna actually probably switch to the smaller brush here. So we're just getting that brush wet, checking the saturation of water on it, and then you want some water in the brush, but with these finer details, you're going to want to make sure that this is a higher saturation of paint as opposed to water, because you're not wanting this to flow near as much, because with this flowing, that would result in quite a bit of bleed onto the main body of it. So yep, right there, that's what we're trying to avoid. So while that's wet, we'll go ahead, get our paper towel, wind it up like that, and then we're just kind of dabbing that off of there. And that is not going to be as noticeable once we're all the way done, because once we're all the way done with the paint, we're going to go through and we're going to do a contrast coat over top of it. So go through, and while we have the fur brown on the brush, we're going to go ahead and do all his little pouches. Get the middle of the belt buckle there. So we're going to do the belt buckle itself in a gold, just to kind of create a point of interest that kind of makes it pop. So we're not going to worry about covering the belt buckle itself. Alright, and we'll get a little bit of water, wipe it off, and get a little bit more paint worked into the brush. So like right there, I don't know if you can see, but we've got some excess water on the brush, and it's not on the bristles themselves, it's just on the base. So we're just kind of wiping that off to make sure that once we tilt the brush, we're not having any excess water drip off, because if that drips off onto what you're working on, it'll kind of bleed the colors together. I'm just going to work around, make sure you get all angles of it, So as you're painting, you're kind of working the miniature in essentially a 360-degree angle to make sure that you're getting coverage on all parts all the way around. And then like from this angle, you can kind of see right here on the front of this little pouch, tucked back in. We missed a little spot, so we're just going to hit that. Tuck around to the other side. So this is going to be a little bit trickier. We're going to kind of from the bottom side have to get the rest of that pouch. Okay, so we've got that full coverage on the pouch, and like right now you can see towards the upper edge of this, you can see that it's really light, and once this shield has dried, you can see almost full white on the top edge of this shield, which is going to be okay because once we go over it with that contrast paint afterwards, it's going to darken that up a little bit. But with that being on the top edge, that's kind of the point the light is hitting it at from, so that's going to be a lighter point on it anyway, so we're not going to worry about that. Let's see, we'll just look everything over. Alright, all looks good. So we will go ahead and just do the little belt buckle on there now. Cleaning the brush off between colors. And something I will mention, the gold we're about to use on the belt buckle is a metallic paint. So when you go and you use a metallic paint, you want to make sure that you are washing the brush extremely well, because metallic paints do have little flakes of the metallic in there. So it's not just the paint. That's what makes it the metallic paint, is that those little pieces of reflective material in there. So you want to make sure that you're getting all of that off of there, switching between a metallic and another color. So we're going to get that from there, then we're going to go ahead and hit it from the bottom. Alright, and now that belt buckle is popping pretty good. So now we will go ahead and go from that gold metallic to a silver metallic for the sword. And get that on there. And when we go through and we're doing this, we're going to go relatively heavy on the paint, because metallics tend to be a little bit thinner in saturation. But regardless of the amount of saturation you get on there, with that flake in there, it's gonna have that kind of that iridescent sparkle you're looking for. And this silver metallic paint is just a large bottle from the craft store that I'm using. It's not one of these specialty miniature paints or anything, because like a silver metallic is something that you're going to kind of use pretty often when you're painting stuff like for Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder or something like that, because obviously a lot of people have like swords, daggers, that kind of thing. So what I do is I go through with a silver metallic, and then I go over it with a contrast to kind of give it that depth to make it look like it's been used and it's kind of worn in. Because if you leave it with just the silver metallic base, it's just going to look really shiny, and that's about it. So now that we've got the pretty much everything covered as far as the base coat, we will go through and clean the brush, obviously. And then what I do for eyes is most of the time I'm just gonna do a little black spot because the detail on these is so small that you can work at it and you can try and get yourself to do like pupils or something like that, but at the end of the day, this doesn't need to be perfect. So we got his little eyes there. So at this point in time, we're done with that, so we'll just clean the brushes. So we've got the base coat done on this. So what we're going to do now is we are going to set the miniature down, and we're just going to leave it for a while, because the next step we're going to be doing is going to be that contrast paint. And you do not want to apply a contrast paint onto a miniature that the paint on it currently is wet, because that'll just kind of make them mix together. And what you're looking for is not a mixture of the paints. What you're looking for is the contrast paint to kind of do a full coverage over top of the paint job you already have on there, to kind of give you that sense of like the character being worn in and the stuff on there is all grimy and used. So what we're going to do is we're going to set it down and we're going to let that miniature dry, and then the next thing we're going to be doing is applying our Wildwood contrast paint. So now that the miniature's dried, we're going to go ahead and get ready to put on our contrast paint, and using Citadel Contrast Wildwood. So we're just going to shake that up, make sure it's good to go. So on these containers, what I like to do is I will pop it open, and then you can see there's a little tab attached to the lid. So that little tab on top of the lid, this bottle will hold itself open. So I'm just going to set that down, and I will just mainly be using this paint along this top area right here. I'm not going to be dipping my brush all the way down. So to start off with a contrast paint, you're going to want to make sure your brush to start with is relatively on the moist side. So I'm checking it's not beading, so I'm going to get a little bit more. Alright, so we're just going to get a very small amount of that contrast paint on there. And then we are just going to start from the top, and you're just going to do a little spot, and it's going to start by appearing a lot darker than what you're looking for. So we're going to get some coverage on there. And then what we're going to do, well, that coat on there is still wet. We're just going to get some more water on our brush, and then we're not going back to the paint, we're just sticking with the water, and then we're just going to continue that contrast down through. So what I like to do is I start with a pretty heavy base of the contrast paint on the top of the miniature, and then I like to work it down through everything. And as you go through, you're going to see that contrast paint kind of start working its way into all the little nooks and crannies on there, and that's what we're looking for, because we're looking for this contrast paint to do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to shading. So I'm just working that, and once you start working with the contrast paint more, you'll start to kind of get a better idea about how it's going to flow. So we're just going to continue to work it on there. We'll get a little bit more water on our brush, and we'll just kind of keep working that down. And we'll work it through the arm there. You can see it kind of working its way in there. So at this point, we've pretty much worked the majority of what we're going to get out of that contrast paint that we've already put on there. So we're going to be applying a little bit more here. So we're going to get the brush wet again, and we're going to get just a small amount, and I'm going to start this application more around the chest area. So we're just getting that on there, and it looks like that we have enough water on the brush at this point. We're not going to need to reapply, we're just working that all the way through. Then a little bit more water on the brush, just a touch more contrast paint. And then we'll just do a little bit through there, a little bit on there, some on his sword, and some on the front of here. So now that we've got that applied, we're just going to go through and we're going to evenly spread that out. And as we go through and we're working, we're going to kind of go back to those other areas that we've already done. And we're just going to be watching those. So as they dry, it's going to kind of thin out the saturation. So we're keeping an eye on that. So if need be, we can work back to it while we still have some contrast paint on our brush, to make sure that we're getting a nice even spread all the way over. So at this point, it's looking like we are about there. So it looks like the top of the ears are a little lighter, so we're going to get some more on there. Get some on the upper arm, holding that shield there. And then it's looking like that is going to be our full coat of coverage right there. So before this contrast paint dries, you're just going to want to make sure that you get that off of your brush, because contrast paint setting in your brush will be a fair bit more difficult to get worked out of there than your normal acrylic paints. So we're just going to close that up, get that all set and out of the way. So this is going to be our finished product after we go through with the contrast paints. So you can see that even with that darker contrast paint, the smaller details like the golden belt buckle right there are going to kind of shine through that. It's just kind of providing you all of that saturation and those shadows. So it kind of gives a lot more definition to everything. So like, it's really noticeable right here on the back of the head. So you can see that it's kind of worked its way into all of that little texture, and it's going to kind of provide some shading in there to make it pop a little bit more. So, and then it's kind of worked its way down into these folds of the cape down here, making that a little bit darker. And then it's kind of accenting the pouch a little bit. And then you get down to the feet and it kind of works down in between the toes there. So we are going to go ahead and set him down so he can dry. And then he's going to be all set for that. And then once he dries, we can go and start to look into maybe doing something on the base, getting it set up with maybe a base coat of brown. And then after you go through with that, you can start to look into things like this artificial moss here. So you can do the base brown and then add a little bit of glue, maybe add some of this. And in a future episode, we're going to go over some things regarding strictly base work for the miniatures, as well as some stuff like on this grung right here. You can see that he is in an action pose, kind of jumping out of the water. So he's got not much footprint as far as him being attached to the base here. So you can see down in this area right here where his foot attaches to this, as well as right here where his foot is attaching to this base. He came separated from obviously being used, being knocked around. So we'll go over stuff like setting up a base for a miniature that you've painted, as well as repairs on miniatures. in a future episode, and you can also look forward to some other stuff, like I'm going to be going over the DIY setup I did for my D&D room, as far as kind of from the ground up building it to kind of look like a tavern, and we'll go over other DIY things like that in the future, as well as some of the other content that we do. So I just want to say I appreciate you guys watching. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, share with anyone if you find this video to be helpful, and I appreciate it. Thank you.